Hi, strangers. I just wanted to put out a little warning before we start the episode. The case we are covering today involves violence against a child and a pretty intense 911 call, so listener discretion is advised. It's the middle of the night on May 30th, 2009, in Arivaca, Arizona. Arivaca is a small, quiet southwest town, only 11 miles from the Mexican border. It's surrounded by canyons and deserts. According to an article by Nogales International, it takes all of 30 seconds to drive past all the stores in the town. The town center is made up of a library, a bar, an antiques dealer, a barbershop, and a grocery store. And that's it. Not too far from that town center, on South Mesquite Road, sits a secluded mobile home with children's bicycles laying haphazardly on top of one another in the front yard. A little after 1 a.m., the following 911 call comes from that house.
911, where's emergency?
Ma'am, somebody just came in and shot my daughter and my husband.
They shot them?
Please send me
What's your
Arivaca, Arizona.
And what's your? And they shot your husband and your daughter. Are they out conscious?
Please, ma'am, please. She's bleeding out of her mouth. Please.
How old is your daughter?
She's 10.
10. And where were they shot?
In the head. In the head. Should I pick her up so she's not bleeding?
No, I want you to leave her where she is. Okay. What I'm gonna do? Are they still there? The people who are there that shot him?
They're coming back in. They're coming back in.
Do you know who they are?
The woman calling the police station is 31-year-old Gina Gonzalez. And that loud popping noise you hear in the background is gunshots being directed at her by the 3 intruders that just killed her husband and her 9-year-old daughter. This is the murder of Raul and Brisenia Flores. Hi, strangers. This is your host, Alexa Morrissey, and today's story is a tragic one that is sometimes referred to as the border vigilante killings. I think when we hear the word vigilante, a couple of different images come to mind. Because of pop culture, the word has become synonymous with heroes like Batman or Daredevil. Someone who takes the law into their own hands and delivers justice without the help of the police. And they're admirable figures in the stories we consume. We identify with them. We all know the frustration we feel when justice hasn't been served. When we see a rapist walk away from court with just a slap on the wrist, or a murderer walk free because of some prosecutorial technicality. In our stories, vigilantes are doing the things that we want to do, right? Save the day, serve justice, be a hero. But here's the thing. In real life, people's views of right and wrong are subjective. A hero to one can be a villain to another, and the perpetrator of this horrendous crime is 100% a villain. And yet, she delusionally saw herself as a patriotic hero. Lock your doors and listen closely. This is Stranger in the House. Brisenia Flores was born on December 13th, 1999, in Pima County, Arizona. She was an average girl growing up in the early 2000s. She loved watching Beauty and the Beast on VHS, playing on her teeter-totter, and she had 2 striped tabby cats, Tiger and Stanley. She had an older sister named Alexandra, and her parents were Raul Flores and Gina Gonzalez. Gina and Raul were both Mexican Americans, born in the U.S., and had large extended families that resided all over the state of Arizona. Where they lived in Pima County is only 11 miles from the Mexican border, which meant that a lot of the residents had Mexican heritage. In 2011, Brisenia was 9 years old, and she had spent most of her life in the small town of Arivaca. She lived in a mobile home that sat on a plot of land that had been in her father's family for generations. Her father owned an art gallery in town, and her mother worked at a store called Arivaca Mercantile. Because Arivaca was so close to the Mexican border, there was a great deal of drug smuggling going on in the area, and 9-year-old Brisenia most likely didn't know this, but her father Raul had been known to deal drugs in the area. He had had several run-ins with the law, but in 2011, it seemed like he was no longer actively involved in dealing, but many in the town were still aware of his past. May 30th of 2011 was an exciting day for Brisenia. She had just finished the 3rd grade, and she was about to start summer camp. Her sister, Alexandra, was out of town, sleeping at a family member's house, and that meant that Brisenia had her new puppy all to herself. The family had just gotten the dog a couple days ago, and Brisenia was in love. That evening, Brisenia begged her mom to let the puppy sleep in her bed with her, but he was still crate training, and her mom didn't want him in the bed just yet. So eventually, they came to a compromise. Brisenia could sleep on the couch with the puppy that night. Her parents went to sleep in their room, and Brisenia snuggled up to her new puppy before falling asleep on the living room couch. At around 1 a.m., Brisenia starts to stir out of her deep sleep because there is a loud knock on the door. In the darkness, she can make out her father walking towards the front door. Raul opens it and finds 3 people, 2 men and a woman, armed with guns and dressed in camouflage. They tell him they are from border control and they are looking for an escaped fugitive in the area and have permission to search the house. At this point, Gina walks into the living room and joins Raul and Brisenia. She sits near Brisenia on the couch, and Raul sits in a chair. As these officials enter their home, Raul starts to notice that something is off. First, no one shows him any sort of official identification when they come in the house. And second, Raul notices that their guns have duct tape wrapped around them. Seeing this and becoming suspicious, Raul asks them to show him some sort of ID. Just as he finishes asking this, one of the men turn to him and shoot him point blank. Raul falls back in his chair and the mother and daughter begin to scream. The gunman then turns to Gina and shoots her in the chest and in the thigh. 9-year-old Brisenia turns to the man who just shot her parents and asks, "Why did you shoot my mom? Why did you shoot my dad?" And the man doesn't answer, but he does ask where her sister is. Brisenia says that her sister is staying at her grandma's house, and then the man asks where her grandma lives, but she doesn't know. At this point, the man begins to reload his gun, and Brisenia begs the man not to shoot her. But he walks closer to the little girl and shoots her twice in the head, immediately killing her. While the horrific murder of her daughter is happening, Gina Gonzalez is bleeding out on the living room floor, but she is still alive. She hears the gunman and his accomplices leave the house after a couple of minutes of searching the other rooms. When she hears them leave, she drags herself to a nearby phone and dials 911. As she is on the phone with the operator, the woman in camouflage walks back into the house and sees Gina on the phone. The woman runs back outside and yells to the gunman, "Oh my gosh, there's somebody alive." Knowing that this is probably her last minutes alive, Gina summons all the strength she has and quickly drags herself to the laundry room, where she knows her husband hides a gun. She pulls a pistol out from between the washer and dryer, and without knowing how many bullets are loaded, she gets ready to defend herself. When the gunman returns and gets close to the laundry room, Gina begins to fire at him. Suddenly, the gunman yells out, suggesting that she's injured him, and then she hears him run out of the trailer. As the door to the mobile home bangs shut, Gina just sits on the floor of the bullet-ridden laundry room, bleeding and in complete shock. Police and medical personnel arrive at the scene minutes later. Neither Raul nor Brisenia are alive. Gina is in critical condition and is rushed to the hospital. It was obvious to police that whoever invaded the home was not border control, nor was a part of any military branch because of the sheer sloppiness of the gunshots. No money was taken from the house, and the only thing that was missing was a small bag of Gina's costume jewelry that wasn't worth much. When police continue to examine the scene, they can tell that Gina did hit one of her intruders during the shooting, and that the person who was hit would most likely be in need of medical attention soon, so they send out an alert to all the local hospitals. But for several days, they hear nothing. As Gina recovers in the hospital, police ask her to describe her attackers. She tells them about 2 men in camouflage and that their faces had been painted black, so she couldn't really distinguish their features. But it's when she says that there was a short, heavy-set blonde woman with them that police perk up. Because there was a local woman that not only matched that description, but had been on police's radar for a while and was most definitely capable of something like this. And her name was Shawna Forde. Shawna Forde, originally Shawna Brightham, was born in Everett, Washington, on December 6, 1967. Not too much is known about her biological family, as she was given up for adoption at an early age. By 5 years old, she was adopted by a family in Washington, but her new adoptive family was not equipped to deal with someone like Shawna. When Shawna was 7 years old, she and her adoptive parents went over to a friend's house for dinner. According to her adoptive mother, while Shawna was at the house, she stole a diamond necklace that was valued at several $1,000s and was forced to return it after her mother searched her room. Her mother also said that Shawna had a tendency to lie about almost everything. When she was a teenager, she alleged that she was sexually abused by her adoptive father, but then later took the accusation back and said it wasn't true, and she even apologized to him. When Shawna was just 11 years old, she was arrested for the first time for burglarizing a house in her area. With her first arrest, Shawna was put into the state's custody and was in and out of the foster care system for most of her teen years. By 17, she had been arrested multiple times for things like burglary, theft, and prostitution. In the early 80s, Shawna moved to Alaska and married her first husband. The marriage, however, did not last long. At the start of their marriage, Shawna gave birth to a child who died of sudden infant death syndrome. Sudden infant death syndrome is an unexplained death of a baby. The infant is usually less than a year old, but seems healthy and then suddenly dies in their sleep. The cause of this syndrome is unknown, but it's believed to have something to do with the part of the infant's brain that controls breathing and waking up from sleep. After the death of her baby, Shawna alleged that her husband was domestically abusive, and the marriage soon ended. By 2000, Shawna had been married 4 times. During her second marriage, she gave birth to a son and a daughter. Family members said that Shawna was not a particularly great influence on her children. A half-brother that Shawna later reconnected with, named Raul, told Seattle Weekly that she taught them how to shoplift. Shawna also used them to distract people while she shoplifted. In fact, Shawna's son Devin was arrested several times on burglary charges. Devin was also charged with beating a woman with a baseball bat, and the woman he attacked happened to work at the same salon as his mother, Shawna. Devin was jailed for the crime, but Shawna maintained that she had nothing to do with the attack. In 2008, Shawna married a man named John Forde, and they were living in Washington together, but like in many of her marriages, the couple was planning on divorcing. By December of 2008, the two were separated but were still living together, and the tension in the house was palpable, especially when they both started dating other people. On December 22nd, John was sitting in the house by himself when a stranger suddenly appeared and shot him multiple times. John was hospitalized, but he did end up surviving the attack. John has never spoken to the press about the attack, but Shawna's brother Raul told Seattle Weekly that the description of the shooter matched the man that Shawna had been dating at the time. A week later, Shawna called police to report that she had been attacked, slashed, and raped by Hispanic gangsters in a local alley. During interviews with the police, Shawna insisted that these Hispanic gangsters were somehow connected to her ex-husband's attack. Police Sergeant Robert Getz told Seattle Weekly, quote, "The case has been closed due to insufficient evidence." After her alleged attack, Shawna moved down to Arizona to pursue a passion that she had been developing for several years at this point: securing the American-Mexican border. In 2006, Shawna joined the Minuteman movement. These were just regular citizens who would keep watch for any Mexicans crossing the border illegally, and then they would alert the official border control. The term Minutemen comes from the American Revolutionary War. Minutemen were members of the organized New England colonial militia, and they were trained in weaponry, tactics, and military strategies, and they were known to be ready at a minute's notice, hence the name. This new Minutemen project to secure the U.S. border was founded by Jim Gilchrist and Chris Simcox, and they described it as, quote, a citizen's neighborhood watch on our border. By 2006, Shawna had started her own Minuteman Project group and announced online that she had become the media director of the Minutemen Project's Washington chapter. Now, the official U.S. border control and law enforcement didn't really take the Minuteman movement too seriously and considered them zealots that had nothing better to do with their time than to watch the border and make themselves feel like they were heroes. But when Shawna Forde showed up in Arizona and started getting more and more involved with the Minutemen down there, police did start to take the situation more seriously because of her extreme rhetoric. Shawna kept a running blog on her Minutemen site called Shawna's Corner, and here is a clip from one of her videos.
You have to be willing to die for your country. And my favorite saying is, the patriot is a brave yet scarce man, hated and scorned. But when the cause succeeds, the timid shall join him, because then there's no cost to be a patriot. Minutemen are dynamic. Their spirit and their journey is dynamic, and it's beautiful. And I think, like if you ever watched Braveheart or watched certain things where you can just see that patriotic love for their country, that you can just see that passion. If they mean what they say what they mean. It's an adrenaline. You get addicted to it. Yeah. It's an addiction. I'm an addict. I'm an adrenaline junkie. So, what do you say?
Shawna's take charge attitude got her a lot of attention from people involved with the Minutemen. But even she was a little too extreme for them. You see, Shawna had started to propose unconventional plans to fund the group. And here was her very convoluted plan. She wanted to start an underground militia group that would rob illegal Mexican drug dealers, steal their money and their drugs, and then sell those stolen drugs to fund securing the border. In her mind, she was a vigilante, taking from drug dealers and putting the money to a good cause. But as we will see, nothing good comes from Shawna's delusions. In the spring of 2009, Shawna began recruiting people to help her enact her master plan. She told several members of the Minutemen that she knew of a house in Arivaca that a drug cartel used to store money, drugs, and weapons. According to Shawna, she had met a member of the drug cartel in a bar, and he revealed that there would be upwards of $2 million in this particular home. Now, why would a member of the drug cartel just reveal this to a random woman? Well, Shawna said that while she was talking to him at the bar, she took his cigarette out of his mouth and stomped it out on the floor to show that she wasn't afraid of him. And apparently he was so impressed by this that he told her all of his secrets. But I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this is maybe one of Shawna's tall tales. Not everyone she told her plan to was impressed with the scheme. Ron Wedo, a Colorado man who frequently traveled to Arizona to participate in Border Watch, was one of the men that Shawna tried to recruit. Now, she didn't know this, but he was already on the fence about the Minutemen's mission, and was still not quite convinced that this type of work should be done without government officials involved. When he heard of Shawna's plan, he did not want to take part. But he also didn't want anyone getting hurt in this crazy home invasion she was planning. So Ron went to the FBI. And here's where this story gets very frustrating. Because 1 month before Raul and Brisenia were killed, Ron Wedo had taped a conversation with Shawna about her plans to rob an Arivaca home and provided the tape to the FBI. Ron also had Shawna draw a general map of where she and her partners planned to invade the home to steal the drugs and money. This map was also provided to the FBI. And this is where bureaucracy played a part in this tragic story. The meeting that Ron had with Shawna was in Colorado. They had met up at a truck stop near Ron's house. After the meeting, Ron gave the tape and the map to a Colorado FBI agent. That Colorado agent sent the map and the tape to FBI headquarters in Phoenix, Arizona. When the map and tape arrived in Arizona, the FBI did nothing with it. The map was allegedly lost in the bureaucratic shuffle, and the tape was filed away. All this information, this very clear warning, was provided to the FBI weeks before the murders, and yet nothing was done to stop it. A few weeks before the home invasion, Shawna officially had 2 men on board with the plan. The first was Jason Bush, who, according to Shawna's blog, served as operations director of her group, the Minuteman American Defense Group, or MAD. On this website, his bio called him an Army veteran of 6 overseas tours and a recipient of a Purple Heart and a Silver Star. But this is a complete lie, because Jason Bush never served his country. There is no record of him in the U.S. Army or in the Marine Corps. Instead, he was actually like Shawna, a criminal posing as an American hero. According to theCrimeLibrary.com, Jason Bush's first arrest was when he was 15 years old. He was later convicted of burglary and charged with assaulting a female corrections officer and attempting escape from a Kansas jail. Jason had been imprisoned for stealing, assault, and was also accused of beating another inmate in jail. And in a 1998 court filing, Jason claimed that he suffered from bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. Of course, Bush probably didn't tell Shawna any of this. Instead, he told her all about his heroic deeds when he served in the military. Jason and Shawna were 2 delusional peas in a pod. The other man Shawna had enlisted was Albert Robert Gasiola, who also lived in Arivaca and is most likely the person that Shawna labeled as her, quote, Mexican cartel informant. Gasiola had been imprisoned on marijuana charges from 1992 to 2000. But other than that, he didn't really seem to have anything to do with the Mexican cartel, but he was a local drug dealer. It would later be revealed that he knew of Raul Flores' drug dealing past, and he was the one that pushed Shawna to choose Raul Flores' mobile home as their target. Like I mentioned before, Shawna Forde was on police's radar as a Border Patrol vigilante, but right after the murders of Brisenia and Raul, they had no definitive evidence that she was actually involved. That is until June 10th, 2009, when police finally get a call from a local hospital. During the home invasion, Brisenia's mother, Gina Gonzalez, had shot one of her intruders, and police knew that at some point that person was going to need medical attention. So they sent out alerts to all the hospitals in the area, and on June 10th, Jason Bush, Shawna's right-hand man, arrived at a Meadview emergency room with a bullet wound in his leg. Once Jason was treated, police immediately took him into custody. And soon after his arrest, Bush sat down for an interview with detectives and detailed the entire crime, including Albert Robert Gasiola and Shawna Forde's involvement. On June 11th, police swarmed an America's Best Value Inn in North Tucson, Arizona. It was in room 129 where they found Shawna Forde hiding out and where they immediately arrested her for the murder of Brisenia and Raul Flores. In 2010, Shawna's trial began. She was charged with 2 counts of first-degree felony murder, an attempt at first-degree murder of Gina Gonzalez, burglary in the first degree, 2 counts of aggravated assault, armed robbery, and aggravated armed robbery. Shawna pled not guilty and completely denied any involvement in the murders. Unfortunately for Shawna, there was a lot of evidence pointing to her being the mastermind of this crime. First, we have Jason Bush's confession. Then, the taped recording of her meeting with Ron Wedo about her plan that was given to the FBI reemerges and is played for the jury. In addition to this, the costume jewelry that was stolen from the house the night of the murders was found in Shawna's car. And then there were the ever-incriminating text messages that she exchanged with Jason Bush and Albert Gasiola. At 1:33 a.m., the night of the murders, a text message sent from Gasiola's phone to Shawna's phone said, quote, "Cops on scene. Stay low." 25 minutes later, Shawna responds, "No worries, all good, just relax. Competition gone." At 2:41 a.m., Shawna texted Gasiola this message: "Can you stop and get a few rolls of gauze and compressed bandages, big ones, at the 24-hour store?" This request was most likely for Jason Bush's bullet wound that they were trying to treat on their own without going to the hospital. There was also a letter that Shawna wrote to her son, who was also in prison, asking him to testify that he had bought the jewelry for her that was found in her car. She started the letter with, quote, "So the story is this," obviously feeding him what she wanted him to say on the stand. On February 22, 2011, a Tucson jury convicted Forde of both murders and sentenced her to death. She is one of 3 women sitting on death row in Arizona. After his arrest in the murders of Raul and Brisenia Flores, Jason Bush's DNA was put into CODIS, and he was quickly linked to another unsolved murder in Washington state. In addition to the 2 counts of first-degree murder for Brisenia and Raul, Jason was also convicted of a 1997 murder of Hector Lopez Partida. In April of 2011, Jason Bush was also sentenced to death. Albert Robert Gasiola was also found guilty in the murders, but was sentenced to life without parole, plus 54 years. Despite all 3 of these perpetrators going to jail and justice more or less being served, there are still so many frustrating elements to this case. One being that Raul Flores was not an illegal immigrant. Not that that matters because killing anyone is not allowed, but he was an American-born citizen. He had nothing to do with the borders these psychopaths were so concerned about securing. In fact, he was chosen as a target not because he was involved with the Mexican cartel, because he wasn't, but because Albert Gasiola was personally feuding with Raul Flores. Gasiola had recently stolen marijuana from Raul, and he believed that he needed to kill Raul or else he would face retaliation. And then there is the fact that Shawna, Jason, and Albert were asking Brisenia where her sister was, because they had the intention of also killing her. It was their mission that night to kill everyone in that house, including the 2 little girls. And then there is the fact that Shawna and Jason were never actually concerned about immigration or Mexican drug cartels. They were just racists. During his trial, it was revealed that Jason Bush actually had ties to the Aryan Nation, which is a white supremacist group. And the police in Washington affirmed that they believed Shawna made up a story about being attacked by a gang of, quote, Hispanic men to throw police off her involvement in her ex-husband's shooting. Neither Shawna nor Jason ever tried to serve their country in any official capacity, and they both had long criminal records, and yet they presented themselves online to be these patriotic vigilantes. And I think this case is especially relevant today. I see people on TikTok and other online platforms, and they just preach this harmful rhetoric and lie through their teeth to push their own agendas. You can see them present themselves as America-loving patriots, wanting to make America, dare I say it, great again, when a lot of them are just racists or criminals like Shawna and Jason, and have never served their country a day in their life. In the beginning of this episode, I talked about how vigilantes are often sympathetic characters in stories, because we all know the feeling of justice not being served. And I mean, look what happened with the FBI in this case. They had a clear warning that this crime was going to take place, and they did nothing to prevent it. In fact, Gina Gonzalez, the sole survivor of the attack, actually filed a lawsuit against the FBI, claiming that it was liable for the deaths of Raul and Brisenia, because it did nothing to follow its own rules and provide word of the impending attack to the agency with jurisdiction over Arivaca. According to the Arizona Daily Star, 3 judges of the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled by a 2-to-1 vote that Gina Gonzalez had no grounds to sue over the loss of her daughter and husband, as the federal government cannot be sued over, quote, the exercise or performance or the failure to exercise or perform a discretionary function or duty. I understand why Gina sued the FBI. I'm sure she was enraged by the fact that there was even a small chance that her husband and 9-year-old daughter could have been saved. But unlike Shawna, when the case was dismissed, Gina didn't take what she considered justice into her own hands and then go on a rampage targeting the people responsible for the bureaucratic mishap. Because when people decide that they are above the law and believe that their own morals are the right ones, chaos and tragedy ensue. Shawna Forde's patriotic delusions led to the murder of a young father and a 9-year-old girl. Brisenia Flores would have been 25 this year. Her sister Alexandra and her mother Gina moved away from Arivaca right after the murders, and they have not returned. The two of them don't speak to the media much about the murders, as they say it's too painful to discuss. The Brisenia Flores Memorial Award was created for students at Brisenia's old elementary school. According to an article by Nogales International, the award is given to students who write about their relationship with a pet or a farm animal, describing how it made them a better person, because it was well known in the community how much Brisenia loved animals. Her 2 beloved cats were actually adopted by her neighbors, and her mother and sister took care of her puppy. The old mobile home on Mesquite Street, where Brisenia and her family lived, has been abandoned, but not forgotten. It is said that many members of the community still leave flowers at the house for the father and daughter who lost their lives there. Stay safe, strangers, and thanks for listening. This episode was written by Alexa Morrissey. Stranger in the House is a Boy Wonder production. All of our sources can be linked in the show notes. And you can now support us on Patreon. We have extra content and even some new merch, so be sure to check it out.